I bought a house a few months ago and moved in last month. The previous owner was a friendly old man that could no longer live alone, so he decided to sell and move in with his daughter. Just to be clear now, apparently he had been allowing use of his driveway to his disabled neighbor lady, largely because street parking is extremely limited, and what little street parking there is pretty much instantly occupied. What I am saying is, unless you have a driveway, you end up having to park a good 5-minute walk away, and that's the best case scenario. I put disabled in quotation marks because the lady in question is just really overweight, and I am not sure if that counts as disabled. Obviously I was unaware of this, so I was surprised to see a large SUV parked in my driveway when I moved in. I ended up having to knock on several doors asking whose car it was because the movers could not stand still on the busy road too long. I figured out it was the neighbor's car, so after a good 10 minutes of knocking, an extremely angry enormous lady opened the door. I told her to move the car, and she immediately started arguing that the neighbor said it was fine. I told her he moved out. I moved in, and no, it is not fine, and to move it because the movers need to unload my stuff. She begrudgingly did. I ended up seeing her walking back half an hour later, completely wet with sweat. Now a few days later I went back to work, and lo and behold, the SUV is parked in my driveway again. I go over there again, spend 20 minutes knocking on the door before this lady opens the door, again, visibly angry. I tell her to move her car. My driveway is not public parking. She protests, saying her ankles can't take walking the distance, and claims I can easily walk. I tell her that while that might be true, it's my goddamn driveway and I want to park there myself. Again she moves her car. Again I spot her half an hour later drenched in sweat making her way home. Well, it happened again a week ago, and this time she would not open her door. I got tired of it and had her SUV towed. She of course came to my house to scream at me. I told her to get the hell off my property. A few days later I had a small fence installed with a lock on it to make sure it did not happen again. I have since been getting dirty looks from her and one other neighbor, and when I told my mom, she told me I should be nicer to people. I do feel sort of bad too. She clearly struggles with the walk after all. My children are 17 and 14 respectively, and I'm hoping the fact that they're teenagers is the reason for their incredibly shitty behavior. My husband, before he met me, had a wife and a newborn baby that passed away in Canada due to hazardous road conditions that resulted in a 4-car smash-up. No one was at fault. It was a horrific disaster. And my husband was devastated as a result and fell into alcoholism to cope. I had my own trauma from the past, and similarly turned to alcoholism to cope. It was at an AA meeting where we met, 20 years ago almost to the day now. And we slowly started to heal together here in the US. I have always been incredibly respectful of my husband's last wife and child. I like to joke that I'm keeping her seat warm until my husband enters heaven. I've had too much loss and hurt in my life to feel jealousy like this. And I am so damaged that I just feel lucky that I got to actually feel love in this world, and that my husband could open his beautiful heart to me. We had 2 children, 2 sons. We'd never told them about my husband's wife or baby, because it's a part of my husband's life that he keeps under lock and key. He has never healed from his grief, and therapy etc. has helped him only to a degree. My mother-in-law told the kids this Sunday gone, as she decided it was time for them to know. She didn't consult us before telling them, and certainly didn't do it in our presence. Since then my sons have been making the most disgusting dead baby jokes. They've been prodding their dad, asking why we'd never told them. And instead of approaching the topic with respect, they're acting like we've kept a secret affair family from them or something. My 14Y//0 went on to say to me in private, thank goodness, not in front of his father, that he was glad my husband's previous family was dead. I broke and yelled at him, and told him it was the most disgusting thing I'd ever heard him say. I asked where his anger was coming from, and he burst forth that we were shitty parents for keeping secrets. He told me that it made so much sense why we were abnormal, why we don't drink, why we are so boring and quiet, why my husband is panicky around roads, etc. The 2 are pretty heartbroken, and I feel like we have just destroyed a part of our children's lives as a result of us staying quiet. I am hurting, my husband is grieving all over again, and I don't know how to proceed. I have and will always reiterate to our kids that they are loved, but this behavior seems so overreactive for the news. A couple years ago, a close friend, Ashley, started a long-distance relationship with a guy, Chris. He has been really good to her, and after meeting in person a few times, they decided to move in together. I was super happy for her as she had a few bad relationships over the years and it was nice to see her in a healthy one. That joy faded the last couple months before she moved a few states over to be with him. The issue isn't her moving, but that she repeatedly joked about having a baby from Chris. At first, I accepted it as jokes, but over time I realized Ashley was serious. For context, Ashley has 2 children from a previous relationship, ages 10 and 12. Chris absolutely doesn't want kids. He told her this at the start, and any time she hinted possibly wanting more, he shot it down, saying it was a deal breaker. Now, Chris is more than willing to accept her children as her own, because he loves her, and after meeting her kids, them as well. He's accepted that they are a package deal with her, and since they are at an age where they are semi-independent, it's not an issue for him. To me, Chris is a real bro, for taking on her kids without issue. Hearing Ashley say she wants a baby out of him, one way or another, bothered me to no end. It's hard enough to find a partner that treats you well and accepts children that aren't their own. To find one that does and then talk about plotting to force a baby seems gross and manipulative. Before her move, I had sat down with Ashley, trying to talk sense into her. At first she resisted, but finally it seemed she understood how shitty it would be. After I felt like she had understood, I put the issue behind me and helped support her through the hassle of moving. A few days after she left, I got a call from a mutual friend who delves into the Wiccan / metaphysical realm. She was distraught and confessed to me that shortly before Ashley's move, Ashley had come to her asking for a fertility spell. This friend didn't feel comfortable about it and refused. When pushed, she said she cast a spell for a healthy and honest relationship, but told Ashley it was for fertility. As you can imagine, I was livid. I messaged Ashley, confronting her about what I learned, and she laughed it off as she was desperate, but magic is fake anyway. So what's the harm? She then let it slip that since Chris was planning on getting a vasectomy in a few months, she had poked holes in their condoms as a last-ditch effort. At that point, I couldn't stay silent. I gathered up screenshots of all the conversations over the last few months and sent them to Chris. He understandably freaked out and kicked her out. Now, Ashley hates me because she was kicked out after a huge move and didn't have a job or money to make it back. She said I'm a terrible person for putting her and her kids out on the street. I'm a native French speaker from Canada, but I have a very pronounced Acadian / kayak accent. For those who don't know, it's pretty much a mix of French and English with some local dialect thrown in there. Pretty common in the Maritimes, where I still live. I'm perfectly bilingual in both languages. I started dating my boyfriend, who only speaks English, about 4 years ago and spent a lot of time with his family. They've all been really great, except for one of his aunts. She says she was a French teacher in Anglophone schools for over 40 years up until a year ago and even studied in France. And she insists on only talking to me in French. I agreed at first since I didn't want to be rude to his family, but it's getting super weird. I don't understand how she was able to teach kids English or how she comes up with most of her sentence. Like I have to guess 90% of whatever she says and hope I'm right because it makes absolutely no sense. Example, she said a la citrouille la tarte va bien dans ma bouche, which roughly translates to the pumpkin a pie goes well in my mouth, when she meant this pumpkin pie tastes delicious. She constantly criticizes my accent and tries to correct my pronunciation of certain words, and tells me I need to pick a language. When I accidentally say something in kayak, speaking proper Francais standard is actually getting harder for me since I've been only studying / working in English. So last night during dinner she started going on about how Acadians were uneducated and made no effort to properly learn a language, which is total BS, and obviously weirdly directed at me. For the rest of the night I stopped guessing what she was trying to say to me in French, acting like I didn't understand anything, and started correcting her as well, which was pretty much every single sentence she said. I wasn't trying to be rude or aggressive about it, but after a while she gave up on the French and ignored me for the rest of the night. Turns out she was super pissed and told everyone I was trying to embarrass her in front of everyone. Looking back, I think I might have taken it too far by not stopping after 2 to 3 sentences, and I feel bad. My boyfriend said I was being. Why? While his mom said she probably deserved it. Forgot to mention that I told her a few years ago that it's hard for me to fully speak proper French as I spoke kayak all my life. Tried to explain Acadian culture, she wasn't having it, surprise, and she stopped for a while but is now doing it again.